Hello, welcome to this session, Azure VMware Solution Simplified Deployment. My name is Emad Younis. I work for VMware. I cover the VMware Cloud Ready Framework, and as part of that, Azure VMware Solution is included. I also cover VMware Cloud Migration.
My name is Trevor Davis. Welcome everybody to our session. I'm with Microsoft, and I'm a senior technical specialist who focuses solely on Azure VMware Solution and have done that for the past 2.5 years or so. Welcome to our session. So your standard disclaimer, which actually in this case is not such a standard disclaimer. So the tool we're about to show, we're very excited about. It's a tool Emad and myself built based on the need we saw out there in the AVS community. At this point, this tool is not part of the platform, but we hope it soon will be.
We're definitely looking for feedback. So as we go through the demo, we'll show you how you can provide us not only feedback, but also in the future how you could participate within the community as well. So how did this really evolve? Since the inception of AVS, we've talked to hundreds of customers, and there's been a lot of reoccurring questions, common, requirements that we've seen, deployment scenarios and migration patterns over our discussions with many, many customers at different sizes, at different scales. And the one thing that we kept on seeing was a need for a unified deployment. And today with AVS, from the Azure portal, you can deploy AVS, but then there's some steps that you have to take after the fact, which means you have to do the network connectivity, and then you have to set up VMware HCX to do the migration. When Trevor and I were working with these customers and in talking to each other, we felt like, what if we could do this deployment end to end, and including having HCX also do the site pairing from on-prem? And that seemed to be something that we wanted to work towards, and something that many customers said, yeah, that would be a great idea if we could have that.
So what you see here, and as Emad was talking about, is AVS is made up of 3 very high-level deployment and configurations, the private cloud, the networking, and HCX. And then within each of those, there's sub-steps that you have to take. Now, none of these steps are long or complicated or overly involved, but as you can see on this screen, there are many steps. So what this application is going to do is it's going to take all of these things you see on the screen here, and you will receive a customized PowerShell script, which we'll talk about in a minute, and that will do everything that you see here on the screen. So instead of you having to interact with all these steps, you provide some information, hit go, and all these things will be done for you. And where at the start, in the upper left, it's deploy the cloud, and in the bottom left is actually migrating workloads. So what this tool will do for you is take you from absolutely nothing in terms of Azure VMware Solution and bring you all the way through to where you can begin to migrate your workloads.
One thing to add here is you still have to have the AVS subscription in place before you get started. That's the one thing the script will not do for you. Now, what you see here is the workflow of what the script is doing. Now, keep in mind, on the left-hand side, the workflow, there's nothing that you need to interact with, just the Microsoft form. So you'll get a link to the form. And this came up through, we were working with Azure Microsoft services together, and we thought, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. What if we start putting some of these things together to do other things? And that's kind of how this project evolved. And, so a customer will come through, go to the Microsoft forms, fill out the information, and at the end, you'll get the PowerShell script via email. Now, it's going to go out, it's going to deploy the private cloud for you. It's going to go ahead and do all the connectivity from your on-premises environment into AVS or Azure, depending on if you have an express route or VPN connection. And it's going to also deploy VMware HCX, including the site pairing from on-prem into the cloud. Now, as we were working on this, we had so many different ideas, but of course, time was pretty limited to get 1.0 out the door. In the future, we're looking at doing a multi-cluster deployment for VMware HCX, adding an identity source, DNS forwarding, an L2 extension for HCX workflow, and even we're thinking about a GUI interface. We definitely want to hear your feedback. There's an email address, so it's AVS Simplified Deployment at Microsoft.com. Please email us. Let us know your thoughts about the script, what you would like to see, any changes you'd like to make. We're open to everything, so we definitely appreciate it. But that's enough talk about what the script is. Let's actually jump in to this interactive demo that we have and show them. What do you think, Trevor?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So now we're on our Windows desktop. Go to our browser, in this case, Edge. And where we want to go is we want to go to aka.ms/AVS guided pilot. And from here, we have Microsoft Forms that we're going to fill out. Now, prior to getting started, I highly recommend going to Trevor's blog, which has the URL up at the top for all the prerequisites. And as you can see here the form tells you exactly what you're going to get, as we talked about earlier when we were going through the slides. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through here and start filling out this form by just adding name, company, email address. So here we're going to add our subscription ID. Now, Trevor, which subscription ID are we putting in here?
So it can be any subscription, but the subscription has to have Azure VMware Solution quota enabled on it. Like all other Azure services, the subscription needs quota, and by default, because of the nature of the service, these subscriptions have no quota enabled. So you would do that. There's a link there that tells you how to get quota enabled, but essentially it's opening a support request, and then once quota is enabled, you're good to go on that subscription for AVS.
Okay. Then we're going to select the region the private cloud will be deployed to. Now, keep in mind that you have to have quota on that region in order to deploy. So in our case, it's West US. We're going to select a new private cloud resource group. Now, Trevor, what if I have an existing resource group?
What we're asking for here is simply, do you want the AVS private cloud to be deployed to a new resource group or an existing resource group? If you say you want it deployed to an existing resource group, you'll be asked for the name of that resource group. If you say you want it deployed to a new one, as we're showing here, you're going to be asked to provide a name for that resource group.
Yep, so I'll give it a name. Now we're going to give the private cloud a name as well. In this case, prod private cloud. And we're going to select the node type. Now, Trevor, I'm familiar with the AVS 36, but what is AVS 36T?
They're both the exact same servers. It's just a different SKU type to indicate trial nodes or non-trial nodes.
Got it. Okay, now that we've selected our node type, we're going to enter in a CIDR block. Now, Trevor, one common question that comes up here is, what gets carved out of the CIDR block?
What will happen is Azure will ingest this CIDR block, and from that CIDR block, carve up into smaller network segments and use those network segments for the underlying plumbing, if you will, for AVS. So this is not for workloads.
Okay. Now we're going to, again, select the virtual network gateway region, give it the gateway resource group name. Now, number 14, you get to select whether you're using a site-to-site VPN or an express route.
The script then will ask you different things. At the end, once the script is finalized, if you're using a VPN from on-prem to Azure, it will wire AVS up to be able to communicate via that VPN to your on-prem environment. And if you're using an express route to communicate to Azure from on-prem, will wire up AVS to communicate to your on-prem environment via that express route.
Okay, step number 20, we're asking if you want to enable VMware HCX. Now, you have the option here to go ahead and select yes, and we'll handle that. If you select no, then you can go back later on within AVS and get to the add-ons section and enable it there. Now, 21 is just asking for your on-premises vCenter FQDN or IP address. And 22 is asking whether your platform services controller is running embedded within vCenter or external. All right, so we should be getting an email here. And as you can see here, you have the script link. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and copy. Again, this is an interactive demo, so we've already copied the information that you just saw from the script. So go ahead from here, call the script.
If you say no here, the script will stop because you do have to validate that all these components are there. So just hit yes, and it'll go through. So what's happening here is we're just logging into Azure. As we talked about before, we need to validate that you have quota on the subscription you've selected. And so what you'll see here in a second or two is the script pauses, and then it'll go through a continuous check of the status. So we fast forwarded a bit, of course, but at the end, you're going to see a screen like this. And now we're moving on. Now the script is moving on to the next phase, which is doing all the network wiring. So normally in a manual deployment, you would have to go through and do all these steps manually, of course.
Okay, so now our AVS private cloud is deployed. We're going to go ahead and deploy VMware HCX within the AVS private cloud. We need to deploy the VMware HCX connector into our on-premises environment. So here you're going to provide your vCenter server credentials. Now, as part of this, we are scanning your vCenter and basically asking you what cluster do you want the HCX connector to be deployed to. Now, in our case, we're going to deploy it to our management cluster. We're going to go ahead and say yes here because we are going to extend networks. So we're going to select our SJC comp DVS.
These screens that are popping up are going to be customized to your environment because we are, as Emad said, we're querying your vCenter.
So here we need to get the information for your vMotion network. Now, as part of this, this is helping us create the VMware HCX service mesh as part of the configuration. So we need this information, and you'll also need some spare IP addresses as part of that. So here I'm just providing the network information, the gateway, the mask, and I need at least 3 free IP addresses within that network segment.
If that vMotion network is not part of the distributed virtual switch or not on vSwitch 0, it won't show up in your list. So it's very critical to have that a port group that is either on a distributed switch or on vSwitch 0 for vMotion.
So here we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for management. Now this is where we're going to be deploying not only the HCX connector, but we're also going to be deploying all the virtual machines that go along with it. Here's also asking us what port group. So we're deploying to the same management port group. And then finally, what data store do we want to deploy to? All right, I think we got everything ready to go. So we're going to hit continue. And here we're going to go ahead and give it a VM name. Hopefully you have this within DNS. Give it an IP address. Again, this is the VM name. Hopefully, again, you have it registered with DNS. You're giving it an IP address. It's on the same, the management network that we've already selected.
So in other words, this is just a way to fill out the OVA properties for that deployment.
Exactly. Yes. Without having to go through, doing it all manually. Make sure that you have proper DNS and NTP, those are very important. Here we're going to go ahead and provide our passwords. And now what it's asking you here when it says the nearest major city, it's basically we're doing a site pairing. Our on-prem environment is in San Jose, California. And so we were going to go ahead and put that in as, our site pairing. And our destination is AVS. And you'll see that later on. Once we log into vCenter, we should see a site pairing going from our San Jose environment to, I believe, I think in US West, our deployment is in Santa Clara. Here, we actually have to provide the password from the AVS side, and this is the same password that you would use when you log into vCenter within AVS.
If you don't know that at this point, which you probably don't, you would, as it shows there, you would go into the Azure portal, select your private cloud, then go to Manage and Identity, and you would find that password there.
Now, finally, we need an activation key. So within AVS, HCX is part of the add-ons. So you'd log into the Azure portal, you would go to add-ons, you'd go to the HCX card, and from there you can actually activate or produce an activation key. That's the key that you're going to populate here.
And just as a side note, if you don't put a key in here, that's fine. HCX will activate itself in evaluation mode, but then you're going to have to turn around and go in manually and do it. So if you have, it's definitely advisable to take the time to go get it now and enter it here.
All right. So now we're going to go through and we're going to download the connector. Yep. So it's deploying.
So right now it's downloaded the HCX connector OVA and now deploying this OVA to your on-prem environment.
Yep. So we can see it here that it's been deployed like Trevor said, and we're going to now power on the VM. You should see it also here in the tasks in vCenter. There we go. And now we're configuring the HCX connector. So this is going to take a few minutes as it goes through and gets all the configuration going, which is all the connectivity and including the service mesh. So you should be able to start migrating once this is done.
And now what's happening here is you're going to see everything fly by really fast, but what's happening here is it's taking all the information that you've input and configuring HCX appropriately for your environment. Now what you see here is that's completed, and it's basically saying, hey, press any key and we'll take you to your on-prem vCenter so you can log in and see HCX.
All right, so it automatically pops up a window, browser window for you. So we're going to go ahead and continue on. As you can see, we're using the vSphere client. We're now logged in, and we can already see that we have VMware HCX. The plugin is installed. Let's make sure that we have our site pairing, because if that's not in place, then this didn't work. And for us, it's working. So you can see that from our San Jose destination, right? This is the connector that we've deployed here. We've given it the name, and here is our Santa Clara, which is AVS. It's not a long distance, but at least you can see that this site pairing works. And then we're going to go to our interconnect, which has our service mesh that shows all the HCX services that were deployed. And as you can see here, everything has the little green circles, which means that we are golden. And we're ready to start migrating now.
Yeah, so as you can see at this point, HCX has been fully configured, and you could go into this vCenter, this on-prem vCenter that we're showing you here, right, in your environment, select a virtual machine, right-click, and migrate it over to AVS.
With that concludes our demo.
All right, thanks everybody for attending. Hope you enjoyed the demo that Emad and I walked you through, and here's some other resources for you to leverage when learning about Azure VMware solution. There's links to both Emad and my blog, some more formalized reference materials from both VMware and Microsoft, and also links to a hands-on lab. Emad, you want to tell them about the hands-on lab?
Sure. Yeah. So today we have 4 hands-on labs going all the way from provisioning a Azure VMware solution private cloud, connectivity using ExpressRoute. That's what we have today. But we also have one for SD-WAN as well. And then we have another module around disaster recovery leveraging SRM. So these are what we have today, and we got more coming soon.
Great info, Emad. Thanks again, everybody, for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you.